Okay, so hi everybody, welcome back to another episode of the World of Ability. I am Emily, one of your hosts today, along with Kurt Ruskiff, and we are um, blessed to have one of our former people who've been on here before, Sabrina, who's coming back on to join us, as well as Patty Ernest. Um, I'll pass it over to you, Kurt.
All right. So, Emily, what is the World of Ability all
Um, Disability advocacy and um, uh, disability advocacy and um, being able to what's the right word, give the perspective of life from the perspective of people with disabilities.
So, Emily, why is that important?
Because it's about everybody, no matter if you have a disability or not.
There we go. So, Emily, you're part of a group that you help with planning and so forth. What do you got going on?
I am a part of the Autism Society, South Central Wisconsin, planning a autism conference that is going to be November 5th um, on Zoom. Um, and everybody is welcome to join that, attend that, because let me know if anybody is interested.
All right. So, Emily, what is it that you have planned for today? Sabrina has been on here before. She's coming back. We have the next 50 some minutes to really take this show and light it up and really get people captivated in what we're all covering. So, what's on the agenda today?
Well, Sabrina, maybe you could give maybe a brief, I don't know if we call it a refresher, a brief, whatever, of kind of what you do, who you are, what you do.
I
Maybe
will.
talk a little more about your, go into a little more about your book and a few other things.
Okay. Thank you so much, Emily, for inviting me and Kurt and having me be here today. Your hosts are absolutely fabulous. I'm so proud of Emily because I watched Emily through the HNP network. She's a co-host, and I watched her start off by barely saying a couple of words. And now Emily is out here hosting a podcast. She is doing the thing, as we like to say. So, Emily, I wanted to take a section. Let's try that again. I want to take a section to celebrate you. I totally, totally respect you and applaud you for pushing through, like all of us need to do. And Kurt, thanks for being consistent in Kurt and I talked, I don't know, it was in 2020 when we met or 2019 or something like that. And Kurt shared his passion with me for the complete community. And I was like, way to go, Kurt. I like it. High five. And he followed through on that passion. And that's why we're here today with the podcast. So I'm glad each and every one of you are joining us today, listening in. We help you in our community. We help you look good and feel good as you explore the world. And exploring the world gives each of us a different perspective. We have a way to look at the world from a different point of view that we didn't see before. And that's highly valuable. I think that a lot of the challenges and problems that we have in this society could be eliminated when we open our hearts, minds to other cultures and get to see people for who they really are. So Emily had mentioned earlier that I'd written a book. I co-authored a book with a 7-figure income earner, Matt Morris. Through that opportunity, I have another secret. Starting September of 2022, we are going to be releasing a second book. This book is done with a different group of women and a gentleman. For those of you who are business owners, are thinking, or you are thinking about going into business, this next book called Worth the Risk is definitely for each of you. We talk from the standpoint of what do you do when you lose $1 million in a business? Some of us can't even imagine generating that type of income. So we have different women in our group that co-authored the book that talks about the challenges of business and how do you overcome those business challenges through your successes, through your failures. We have women who started their favorite business and then they lost it all in a year. How do you get past that? So we take a Christian perspective. We take one of my favorite passages of the Bible and we talk about the business benefit through that passage. Doing business God's way, in essence. So I'm looking forward to sharing more about that in the future as well.
Awesome. Yeah, Kurt, comments?
Well, Emily, can you let us know how do we get this book? I know there's 2 of them, but the one's in release, but there's the first one we talked about. How do we get it in?
I believe it's on Amazon, right, Sabrina? Or is it other places too?
Well, the very first book is on Amazon. The second book, I will send you a link to order that book. We are self-publishing that particular book, so we're taking a different approach this time around.
Oh, okay. Anything else, Kurt?
Emily, what's the name of the book?
It's called Worth the Risk.
What's the risk? All right.
Worth, W-O, oh, let's try that again.
What's the worth?
Yeah, Worth the Risk.
Worth
the risk.
So we look up Worth the Risk on Amazon.
Yeah. And it's not out there yet. I'm giving you guys a it's going to be launched September 22nd of 2022.
So that's just in like a few days.
Yeah, a couple of days.
So remind me, what's the name of the first book?
The first book is called Limitless Success with Sabrina Morris. And that one is on Amazon now.
Okay. So, Kurt's putting both titles here in the chat. But Kurt, do you have anything? Well, I add one thing here.
Well, Emily, I'm hoping you can help us take a tour of this work that you're bringing forward through having Sabrina on here. Limitless Success being the first book, Worth the Risk being the second one that's on release right now. And so, Emily, Sabrina's been on with you in past podcasts. Can you share with our audience a little bit more in terms of how you've come to know Sabrina, what you like about Sabrina, how you're trusting her, the old know, like, and trust, and, just kind of, I can kind of tell you're always eager to invite her back on our shows. Why is that? What is it about Sabrina, Emily?
Yeah, well, among other people. But but I met, or Kurt and I met Sabrina, I believe, through the Happy Neighborhood Project. And also, Sabrina's been on Zach Clayton's Pact podcast several different times as well. So I was in on a few of those. So I'm kind of over. Was it in 2020 that I met you, or was it in 2021? I can't remember.
Yeah, I think it was 2021. It might have been closer to the beginning of the year. Kind of blurry.
I sort of lean towards that too. But I guess kind of between getting to through H&P and then with being on Zach's podcast and then being on a few of our other shows, it's been a good time. So yeah. Right, Sabrina? Like, it's been good to get to know you along with everybody else in H&P and other places.
Yes, that's exactly how we met, through H&P. And Emily is always either on Zach's podcast, she's working behind the scenes, getting us all organized, making sure we show up on camera, anything we need in the chat. She actually goes through and put little notes for us in the chat so that we can keep track of where we are in the podcast. And that's very helpful. I know the audience doesn't see that aspect of it, but Emily's on it. She's always, isn't she, Kurt? You have a great assistant. You did good.
Absolutely. It was a little bit of dumb luck. I actually met this lady by the name of Anna Maria Bliven first. And so Emily Gallmer was kind of the bonus package that came along with that introduction. So, all right, Emily. So what we're going to do here right now, folks, is I'm all about just getting right to it and showing what we're talking about. I think, there we go. Somehow that was grayed out a little bit, but this is the Amazon page showing you this fabulous book here, and it gives a little bit of a chance to look inside. Look at this here, Limitless Success. Looks like a book that you just want to have in your hand and tear open, or go ahead and get it on the Kindle version. So
I was going to say it's in Kindle and paperback and so there, and then Amazon. So you have a few different ways to see it.
All right, so Emily, what's the backstory about this? Limitless Success. Emily, why would Sabrina write a book about that? What's the inspiration?
Sabrina, you might need to sort of refresh my memory a little bit, but
no, that's fine, Emily. Kurt is setting you up, and we're going to help it. We're going to answer this question together. So my mother was an amazing woman. She was an entrepreneur. She was the kind of woman that put that whole myth of single women raising men to a lie. I mean, that's crazy. So when my mother transitioned to be with the Lord, she left such an impact on each of our lives. All of her pallbearers were actually her sons. She birthed one of them, but all of the others were just like her children. And if you were to tap one of those guys on the shoulder and say, that's not your mother there, I would stand back because an explosion was going to happen. So all of us would always joke and say, you know what, Mother, you are going to be with us forever, even though you may not physically be on the earth. And she would say, she called us all baby. She would say, baby, I'm going to live as long as I can so I can get even with my children. And that was the running joke. So I remember, and I told that story because the portion of the book was written as a tribute to her memory and her wisdom. She would always help each and every one of us through her wisdom out of some of the most devastating things that we experience in our lives. And I know each of us that are here today listening or even on replay can think back at a point in their life where you hit what's considered rock bottom. And rock bottom can only be defined by you. No one else can say, oh, that's not a big issue. If it's a big deal to you, it's a big deal to you. How do you get past? What do you do when everything looks so bleak you don't know where to turn or who to talk to? So my mother was that voice, and she's still that voice even though she's not here. All of us were right. We still hear her voice. So, for example, one of my brothers said that he was without divulging too much of the story, he was doing something that my mother would not appreciate and would not be, proud of him for doing as a young man. And so he was telling us this story, and this was after my mother had transitioned. And we all looked at him like, really? Because he's really sharing this challenging decision that he made, which my mother would not appreciate or like. And he proceeded to say that he had this dream, and my mother said, baby, you need to not do that anymore and shift, make a better decision. And he said he woke straight up in the bed and he was like, oh my God. And we were all like, oh my gosh, what are you going to do? And he was like, I'm going to stop doing the thing that's destructive in my life and change and make a different decision. That's the kind of impact my mother had on everybody she talked to, touched. And sometimes we didn't want to hear what she had to say, but we knew that she would not always be here with us. And so she would say, I know that I'm in your business. She'd tell all her children that no matter how old you got, you were still her baby. And that includes all of her extra children. She had more sons than daughters, though. So she would establish that. She said, I already know I'm in your business. So now that that's out of the way, because God holds me into account or holds her, she always said God holds her accountable for being our mother first, then our friend later. And so she said, I am your parent. So, and then she would go into what we wanted to hear or not. And out of respect for our mother, we would listen to her wisdom. And we are, now that she's not on this earth, we are so thankful that we listened to her wisdom, because we may not have needed it of what we believed at that time, but we definitely use it now, even though she's not here. So limitless success deals with your lowest moment in life and how to get past that. I was on another podcast, or I was listening to another podcast, and they were talking about how suicide is so rampant today, or how the people, so many people are contemplating that. What do you do when you're being nagged, pulled in a direction which you, in your gut, in your heart, in your essence? I don't say gut because gut contains poop, and that doesn't sound good. But in your essence of who you are, knowing that suicide is not the best option. I had one of my mother's daughters, a sister from another mother. Her father committed suicide. And when I look at the impact and destruction that was left behind in her life, it's just not worth it. It's kind of like you have to continue living for those who love you. Do it for them. Because I even though her dad has been has transitioned many, many years, it still impacts her. And that's one thing I think that she and my mother would have those private conversations about. My mother is so unique. She didn't share business across each of the siblings because She was our confidant. We were having a conversation. We wanted to know about that conversation. My mother would always say, well, talk to your brother, talk to your sister if you want to know. You know, if they want you to know, they'll tell you. So, long story shorter, my mother always said that she was going to train us up in the way that we should go. And that's based on what God wants for her. So she would always tell us when we're at our if we don't know, talk to God about it. The one who sent Jesus, talk to him about it. You know, get an answer for him and be expectant of it, that answer. So that's just a little preview as to the portion of the book that was written by myself. There's a lot of other author stories that, I mean, one gentleman was ran over literally by a car and had to learn how to walk and move again. One gentleman, I call him cousin because we both have the same last name. He read through the book and he was like, oh my gosh. He said, I thought my challenges were bad. I didn't know people went through so much. And I reminded him that each of us have our own unique challenges to us. And so what's harder for one person may not be as complicated to the other, or vice versa. The point is to get past your challenges. What do you do when you fill in the blank? And some of us are there right now. We're facing some of our biggest challenges. One thing my mother would say is keep moving. She would say you can put your head, and when she says down, you know how when you're really working, you put your head down and you're getting the task. You're like, you put your head down, keep moving forward through your task. And when you look up, you'll eventually be where you want to be. Now, that's not putting your head down having a pity party. Because my mother always hated that. She's like, there's no room for pity parties and self-pity. I mean, you do that, and she'd be like, she was like, nope, you don't have time for that. Think about what you need to accomplish. Start working on it. And another thing she would say, do something, even if it's the wrong thing. And for so long, I never understood that. I'm like, why would she say that? Even after she left. And so I asked her first cousin, that question. I said, Mother would always say, do anything, even if it's the wrong thing. Why would she say that? And she was, being that they were first cousins, she was like, okay, why are you struggling out of this? You know, she's like, she said, she means do something so that even if it's wrong, you will learn from it, adjust, and go on. Don't just sit there and have a pity party, woe is me. You know, that's one of those scenarios where you may need to look in the mirror at yourself if you're in that part. Don't knock your teeth out or anything, but grab your attention. Look in the mirror and talk to yourself. No, we are not having a pity party today. We need to do these things. And if you're not sure what they are, pick up a pen, get a journal, and start. Okay, number one, even if it's basic, you know, and you're just sleeping so much and you can't wake up. Maybe it's, okay, set an alarm after 6 hours of sleep or 7 hours. Well, you're supposed to get 8 at least. Don't quote me on that. That's a doctor thing. But if you know your body, so let's say you say, okay, I want to get at least 8 to 12 hours of sleep, or 8 hours. Okay. So then you write down 8 hours, and then you say, okay, I set an alarm. There's no such thing as too basic. It's whatever you need to get you from point A to point B, and that's different for each person. That makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Kurt, I'd like to get her input about what's been going on with me lately.
All right. Well, Sabrina, are you ready if we open up a can of worms?
Sure.
All right. All right, Patty, take it away.
So, Kurt, you go ahead because you do a better job of describing it.
Well, maybe that's because I know how to make things dramatic, you know. But what we have here, Sabrina, is a story about, living in 2022, and you go just a few months back to June, and Patty here is living away her life, like your lifestyle promoter. And so she's building her lifestyle the way she knew it in June. And then coming into July, lo and behold, what happens is Patty gets to answer the door, and who's there but the police? So Patty is taken into custody, whisked away to a mental hospital, and transferred to various clinics, forced to take pharmaceutical medication, and proceeded through court hearings, seeing judges, seeing or hearing about psychiatrists that are driving all this. So 3 psychiatrists, driving all of this, that Patty is under this, classification of severely mentally ill. And so they grab at an Arizona law that dictates that Patty doesn't have a choice about any of this, and it's like martial law, type of thing, you just got to do it because the government says so. And, where does this stem from? It stems from Patty has on a day where she needed to let off some steam, and she has a roommate. So the roommate is looking at this and having whatever their uncomfortability is with this, and reaches out to law enforcement to say, pretty much like, take care of Patty, like, get her out of here. And, she can't have a choice. So because a roommate is saying that this is the way it's got to be for Patty, now all of a sudden the government is following suit, and Patty is like a prisoner in her own house, and like a prisoner as far as her own body, because these drugs have to pump through her veins without her say so. And, Patty is thrown into this tangled web, and like just really in dismay about how she doesn't know what's going on. It's like it's seriously like she's not living her own life. It's like, whose life was I thrust into?
Yeah, and it all stems from a restraining order.
Yeah, there's a restraining order, and so basically she has to go through the proceedings to agree that that she's going to abide by the no contact with the restraining order, and so on and so forth. So it's just a comedy of errors that is not funny, because I take it very seriously when when people are forced to do it. And I can appreciate the Arizona law. I'm not trying to say that there's a law in the books that doesn't have its place. But when you have this mismatch, this misfit type of activity going on by professionals, and that they're in cahoots with each other, that they're scandalous, that they're looking out for each other, and that it just gets to be all of these people with their jobs and all this empowerment and authority take somebody like Patty and make her their victim. So Patty is going through a victimology, and a victimization, and there's a stigma that comes with it. Not that there should be a stigma, not because she's got the title severely mentally ill. It's just that it's like they look at Patty that it's more of, she just has to do what they tell them. See, and I shared this with Patty that I understand a sliver of that position. I'm not going to claim to, as much as I know from what Patty has shared about her circumstances, I honestly still cannot relate. I mean, it's like so bizarre. We're talking about taking this to Hollywood, putting it on the silver screen. I mean, this needs to be available on Netflix and Amazon Prime. And, this to me is going to get out, because this is just not humane. It's inhumane.
And it's not over yet.
Yeah. And this could be going on for another year, Sabrina. for all Patty is to know. And so Patty is like fighting for her life right now. And she's worked with Emily here. You talk about the amazing Emily. And, so Emily's got a spreadsheet going of over 50 contacts right now. And there's only one person, just one, and in the recent week, finally stepped up and shows the ethics, the integrity, the ethos, to say that somebody is at least in the right direction, to really look at Patty and say, what's going on here? How does it serve Patty the best? Sure, consider the public. Sure, consider Patty's roommate. We're not saying disregard the roommate's concerns. We're not looking to disregard the government's responsibility to look out for the best interests of the public. But to me, this is just a perverse, use of authority and application of law. And to me, I'm seeing, before Patty's done with this, a whole lot of people going to be in a whole lot of trouble, because I don't see any other way about it. So that's what Sabrina, that's what Patty wanted you to know about. So Patty, I'll take it back to you. Is there another chunk of the story that you want to make sure Sabrina has, or is that the rendition?
You have it. You have it right. Yeah.
Yes. So Sabrina, I know you're getting kind of, the slanted version from where Patty sits versus these psychiatrists or the judges or the attorneys or, the independent living center or this or that or the other thing. But just based on our biased version, what are your thoughts about this? What strikes you as I tell the story?
Well, you know what? I have a quick question for you, Patty. Was the restraining order done before or after? Where does the restraining order come into the process?
Before. It was before.
Before all of this happened.
Yeah, it's what started this whole process.
Oh, okay. So without knowing more about the restraining order, because I know restraining orders you can get in a lot of trouble if you go around someone or be close to someone that has a restraining order, and things can get twisted. So one thing I can tell you, Patty, too, there's a lot of injustice that's done in the system. I know there's a lot of people that trust the government. They trust this, they trust that. That's an individual thing. I won't talk about that right now because you probably get a little bit of my bias on that aspect. The thing that I would recommend you do is, I know it's kind of like I can't imagine, like my brain is like, I can't imagine in my mind's eye what you're going through at all. The only thing that I can come up with that's similar, my sister, she helps. I'm going to introduce you to my sister as well, because she helps. She's not an attorney, anything like that. She belongs to a nonprofit organization that helps individuals navigate these systems of injustice. I'm putting the word injustice, right? Like, for example, she's working with the one gentleman, which I'm not going to say his name or anything like that. Even if I had it, I'd probably forget it in the moment. He has been locked up in prison on an accusation with no bail, no anything, and they're keeping them in prison. This sounds very similar. Your situation is from a medical standpoint. They're locking you up. They're poisoning your system. They're putting drugs in your body. You don't get a chance to make a decision for you. That's unfair in my brain, because you should have a right to make your own decision. Now, I don't know if you violated a restraining order or somebody else did that started down this path. My mother would always say, you can learn from anything, even if it's what not to do. So if there was someone that placed a restraining order on you, or you had one on them, and then you called the police to come and get those people away from you, and everything was switched back to you? Is that what happened?
No, not exactly, no.
Do you mind sharing what happened, or is that too personal to go into on the show?
Well, the thing that helps sort it out is it's two separate things. The person who applied the restraining order, you know, has another set of, you know, opportunities that have been had to, you know, just resolve this in some other non-legal way. But this is the way that person has chosen to act, is with a restraining order. The roommate, you know, more was just, you know, calling out to have Patty dealt with because of that one moment and that one day, and then just getting fired up to just really, I don't know if it's about proving to Patty that, you know, that a certain action or behavior is not going to be tolerated, or kind of what really flared this to really go reach out to the long arm of the law. But and then really just, to me, manipulating the system to get what you want, you know. And so it's just bizarre to me that we have a society that I can see starting down that path, that I can see, but that it gets before a judge, and then the way the paperwork is written up, that obviously the write-up is biased, because it's fraud, really. To me, it's fraudulent. To be able to know you're sitting in the court of law and be able to put this before a judge who is going off of that documentation and making a decision that reigns over Patty's days, and that it's a complete misrepresentation. You know, one of Patty's concerns is the public defender. You know, kind of like you can imagine. I mean, I think people aren't amazed when a public defender is not up to snuff or not really meeting expectation, but that's kind of what we have here, is a public defender just turning that wheel and not really looking at it to say, how can we correct, you know, the course that this is being taken down in the court system, and just really just collecting another check. That's what bothers me. We are so much in love with money that we're willing to do this type of thing. It's like ransom. You know, it's like, I don't know what all to call it. It's like, you know, Patty's being used for dollar signs, and it's just really akin to where America just needs to take a better check-in. Like the hundreds of millions of us need to really check in. Like, if you look at the last decade of our politics and, you know, bogus like this, you know, we all need to take a check-in. We like to dump it off on Congress and all that, you know, but to really look at it, it is a representative body. And to me, I think that's what scares us. It scares us that those individuals in Congress represent their culture in America. To me, if the hundreds of millions of us are really bothered by Congress, we got to get things really, you know, developed a lot better in our backyard.
You brought up a key point that I still can't understand this. My brother, he studied law a lot. Like, he's really good. He's one of those that have an open job offer at one of the top firms in the country. They just want him to go back to school. So this is what he told me. I was expressing, just like you and Patty here, like, I don't understand why the law would do this. I don't understand. It's not fair. You know what my brother said? Wisest thing he could say. He said, sister, the law doesn't give a fill in the blank about you. The law cares about who can argue the law the best. So you have a public defender. They're not in the game. I mean, you're right. They're probably just there like, oh, well, they probably are overloaded with caseloads. They probably didn't even know who Patty was until she walked up. I don't know. I could be wrong. So, or they did study and they did a really, really bad job, or they didn't care, or they didn't know how to argue the law the best. And that's what my brother always says. If you want to get a leg up on the law, Choose someone that's going to argue the law better than the other person. Justice, they don't, what's that word? There is no justice in the law. And that's something that it took me years. There was so long, I couldn't even repeat that. This is a history of having to be told. If I had $1 for every time my brother told me that, we'd probably be able to give Patty $1 million for a good attorney. Okay? I could not understand that. And that's something that he told me. Sister, the law doesn't care about you. It cares about who can argue the law the best. Okay. First point. The second thing, and that's why I'm going to introduce you to my sister Ree, because she may, or her connections may know of a good attorney that can argue the law for you. Okay.
Thank you.
The second, yes, and I'm going to be going by to see her later today. And so I will mention you and I'll get your contact information from Emily. She's great at that. And then the second thing is that I heard another part. Now I listened to some guys that they do like a rebel capitalist show. The other guy, I can't think of his name, Gregory Manarino. These guys talk about the exact same thing you hit on, Kurt, and that is, why isn't the public more up in arms about how the Congress people are supposed, and I'm going to put air quotes because they're there to really serve themselves. I'm not into politics. Never have been into politics. That's my brother's area. There's other people in my family to do that. And they always said, yes, stay away. Because I noticed that anytime anything is done, and I don't know if this is the right word, but there are donkeys there out here that I call asses, little donkeys. If they're done ass backwards, there's a high probability politics is in the play. This is what Sabrina has seen over her career. Crazy stuff happens, politics. Stupid stuff happens, politics. And they don't even care about what I call the war fallout or the fallout from that. Given I don't have the full story of Patty's story, but the fact that they are pumping drugs in her body against her will, that is fallout. I don't think anybody should be forced to take pharmaceutical drugs that have those weird side effects. Do you know all the side effects of the drugs that they put into your body, Patty?
No.
Okay. First thing, number one, well, we're on 3. Number 1, the law doesn't care. It's who can argue. Number 2, politics is involved. It's stupid. Okay, that's my perspective. Number 3, I would find out what the side effects are for every single drug that they had you on. Okay? Because now there's a lot of drugs that have bad side effects, and they're required by law to say what those side effects are. But you as an individual should decide, is the advantage worth the disadvantage?
Sabrina, they gave me 10 pages of these medications each, about 10 pages to read of each one of these medications.
Okay. Did you have the doctor point out or highlight, which is that's their job, they're supposed to be paid, to highlight what the side effects are for all 10 pages? Now,
no, I don't have it.
Okay, so I would go back to them and make them do that. I would say, look, you need to tell me what the side effects, or just go out and do your research, or call the company and find out what those side effects are and document those side effects. Because you need to be aware of the consequences of the drugs that were pumped into your system. Okay? That would be the other thing I would recommend you do. And if you see a side effect that you are not comfortable with, I would be all up and like, nope, I'm not doing that. I do not want to have whatever side effect is in there. Figure it out. If they're going to force you to take a drug, then they, at a minimum, should allow you to choose the drug with no side effects that works best for your body. Okay. I also met another lady, and I don't know if she still does this or not, but they do testing on DNA testing, and based on your DNA type, you can get a list of all of the drugs that your body will not take, that totally will reject because of your DNA. It's like they do a DNA test. Let's see if I get this right. They do a DNA test, and it'll tell you any drug that you're allergic to. Like it'll say, don't put this in them, don't put that in them, you can't take this or that. Because a lot of us don't know. And by law, when they check you in, I say by law because, I'm not the best at the law. We've already established that a million times. My brother had to explain to me the basic legal principles. So they are supposed to document anything that you're allergic to. And if you're allergic to something, you're not supposed to take the drug that causes that allergen. Okay, so that would be the other thing, Patty. Find out the side effects to those drugs, because you could be you don't want to have any additional symptoms or problems because of a drug you took. That makes no sense. And a drug that you didn't get a chance to really make a decision because they gave you 10 pages to read. If you were all that, and I'm going to use this word crazy, why would they think you would be able to read 10 pages of drug material? The way people think from a logical perspective makes no sense. They should have taken extra time, given the so-called situation, and really explain everything to you.
They didn't.
Okay, that's another thing. And in my brain, and I could be wrong, because remember, guys, I don't understand the law like my brother does. But that, like right there, sounds like an opportunity to see who can argue the law in terms of how these drugs were applied to your system. Just saying. So I know, Patty, it almost feels like that your whole life, I'm sure it does. I mean, I can't imagine somebody reaching in and grabbing out my life. Just because in one moment of time, you just were like, I can't take it anymore. And you just went there. And all of us do it. I'm sure every single one of us on this podcast and those that are listening have that moment, and we have a way of going, And so we should be able to do that in our own privacy without hurting anybody else. Just to let out some of the negative energy, just to yell it out, scream it out. And then once you get over the tantrum, I used to have one leader tell me, she was my director at one point. She was like, okay, you get an hour to have that, that moment. And then after that, you got to let it go, sit down, and say, okay, how are we going to fix it from that journaling perspective? Now, you're in a different situation. Do you still have any control or any say where you can go or what you can do?
In terms of
your life, like, do you have your freedom back, or are you still being hospitalized? Or
no, I'm not being hospitalized at this point. I do have my freedom back to some extent, yes.
Okay. So then one thing I would definitely do is find out the side effects of the medication. Because you don't want, I don't know what they put in your body, but you don't want to have a side effect of a medication cause you to have some kind of relapse, or where they consider that they're going to take more of your freedoms away. So you need to really understand what those side effects are. And I keep beating this up because I have one of my aunts, her husband is dealing with a stroke side effect from a drug. And now she's got to deal with everything else because they made the decision to take a drug that has a side effect of stroke. I don't understand this. I don't understand how the pharmaceutical companies get away with that, but they do. Okay, whoever has the biggest pockets get to make the rules, right? So that's the first thing I would do, is find out, and then I would go and find a doctor who has your best interest at heart, so that if there was any side effects from a potential drug, there has to be some kind of way to flush that out of your system.
The doctor is court ordered.
Okay. Well, go and find your own doctor. That's going to be for your benefit.
But the
So
doctor
I
is
don't know,
court ordered. I can't change the doctor.
but you can get a second opinion. The court says you can't have a second opinion.
No, I haven't read that into it.
Okay. Yeah. What I'm saying is I would get another opinion. I learned in life that there's three, I can't think of the third. There's two professions whereby when I pull somebody that's on the medical side or the attorney side, I will fire them quickly because their niche is too life impactful, if you will. So, for example, if I'm looking to hire an attorney and I don't think they can do the job, I will fire them very, very quick and move on to the next. The same is true with doctors. If I have a doctor and they're not showing me that they have my best interest at heart, now you have a court-ordered doctor, you're getting into legal stuff. We already know that's not my strength, okay? So I'm just sharing with you what I would do in that scenario. I would definitely figure out a way to get a second opinion. And if the doctors that you had did not go through or will not, because if you go back and ask them, hey, I need you to go through the side effects of every drug that you put in my body, and they won't do it, you need to get another opinion so that when they pick up your meds, you can ask these questions. And what are the side effects? Are they documented? Where is documentation for these? And then that way you can make an intelligent decision based on the information provided. Ask questions. My sister is, and I tell you this because my sister is fighting MS, okay, the one that I'm going to introduce you to. And she is so smart that she literally self-diagnosed. When we go to different appointments, it's very critical to ask the doctor questions. There are some cases where some doctors don't want to answer the questions, and that's where I will go with her and say, I do what I do, and the next thing I know, they're answering her questions. So the doctor's job is to answer your questions. If they don't answer your questions, that second opinion doctor needs to be fired, and you go find another doctor that's going to answer your questions. So does that make sense? You have to fight for you. And that's one thing I watch my sister do, and it's very sad, but it's very true. You know what's going on in your body better than anybody else around you. And you have to be able to articulate it, and that's not always easy, to explain to the doctor. And you have to find a doctor you can communicate well with, too. You have to find a doctor that's not going to just be like, and go on. I watched that when my dad suffered. I think he's transitioned now to be with the Lord, but my dad suffered about 6 documented strokes. And there was one scenario where I'm not telling you something, Patty, that I didn't do myself for my dad. So my dad had some military background in the medical industry. And so he was highly aware of the side effects for different drugs. So my dad made a decision that he did not want to take the medical or the pharmaceutical drugs because of the side effects. And the doctors in the hospital went like this at it. Rah! But they didn't know they were about to face me. So what I did is I said, okay, this is about a conversation. So we're going to have a meeting about this. And they didn't know that I used to work with VPs, vice presidents, CEOs, CIOs, and above. So to me, a medical doctor is like a peer, not even a peer to me, but a peer. When I say peer, P-E-E-R, I think that's how you spell peer. Spelling is not my strength. So he had the chief doctor. My dad was there in his bed, the chief doctor, my brother, brilliant with law. We talked about this. My brother was there, I was there, and his head nurse, another assistant, and this main doctor. And so we're having this conversation, and the doctor decides, because he's the doctor, he's going to start yelling at me. Now, I don't know if you can tell, but I have a very loud voice, and I'm controlling my pitch and tone on purpose because my mic won't, it'll be blown out. So when this, and this isn't, I'm telling you this story to give you an example that you have to stand up for yourself. Or in my case, I had to stand up for my dad. And my brother's also in the room. So this doctor is going to start yelling, like, yelling. And I'm like, well, wait, I'm looking around like, okay, I did not raise my pitch and tone. So what I did is I raised my pitch and tone to match him. Oh, we're going to take this point. And I wasn't even yelling. Like, I'm just talking normal. But I'm so loud that my normal sounds like a yell. So I said, oh, we're going to do this. I said, or we can act, and I brought it back down to the way I was talking, or we can act like professionals and have a professional conversation about my dad's choices. You choose. You have to remember that they work for you. And I told him, you work for him, not the other way around. I had to do that with my mother as well. I have many stories. I'm not a big fan. It's not that I'm not a big fan about doctors. There's good ones and there's bad ones. And when there's bad ones for you, and that's individual, you got to fire them and move on. I noticed that in the senior community, not all, but now we're talking about Sabrina's story. I don't want anybody writing me, telling me about no craziness, because I'm telling you about my experience. Everybody's experience is different. And it sounds like Patty's experience is a little similar, right? So I'm talking about Sabrina's experience with her parents and my mother. So when I was in Seattle, because my mother would live with me half of the year where I wasn't half the year with my brother in Colorado. So she came out to Seattle, and we always had to watch her heart. So she had a heart issue. So we took her to a specialist. I faxed over all the paperwork, did all this work, because they were on the old school system where you had to fax, you can email stuff. This is ridiculous. So then I get there and I walk in there, and I had to really calm down because I also have a background in lean. So when I walked in there, I see all these seniors just sitting in the room, lined up, just sitting there. I'm like, isn't there anybody helping them? This is not even good business. You can't even project your own flow to get enough people to doctors in this team to handle people so they're not sitting there all day. They have other things they could be doing. So what I did was I talked to the lady, and I don't remember what I said. So I have to go back to what my mother said I said, because I don't remember. She said in a nutshell, I had told them they were all incompetent. I didn't use that word, but I just said that. They were all incompetent. And then my mother did not need to be there. And I called the doctor out to the front to talk to me. And I told him that each one of these people, and she said, I pointed to other people in the room. I don't remember doing all this. I just remember that I was very upset at how the medical system was treating the seniors. So she said, I pointed to everybody in the room and said that, my mother didn't have to take this. She didn't have to be treated that way because she was my mother. And that doctor needed to remember these people he works for them, not the other way around. And he needs to run his business in a manner such that it's reflected in that avenue. And so I took my mother out of there, and I arranged for her to have a specialist and blah, 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 blah. Went down a whole different path. But I noticed that in the medical community, you have to fight for you. And I hope and pray in that moment of me saying stuff I don't remember I said because I went angry, that it helped some senior that was sitting there that didn't have anybody to fight for them. So you've got to fight for you, Patty. You have to. And that includes with the doctor. You have a doctor that doesn't provide the service you need, guess what you get to do? You get to find another one. Now, the court order one, I don't know how to circumvent coming from a different perspective and saying, okay, this guy is not meeting my needs. How do I get another one? I don't know. But in the interim, if it doesn't say that you can have a second opinion, go for a second opinion. And keep going for that second opinion until you find someone that has Patty's best interest, literally, at heart. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think my doctor pretty well does have my best interest at heart.
Okay, good. Good. So
He
that
doesn't
doctor,
want me to go through this any more than I do.
good.
And you know what?
Good.
They don't even know, he does not know the reason that I was in the psych units. It's unspecified. He does not have a diagnosis on it.
Like I said, like my brother taught me, you need someone that can argue the law the best, who can argue that point better than anybody else in the courtroom that day in and out.
Yeah, well, that's easier said than done, too.
Say that last part?
That's easier said than done, too.
Very much so. You have to go through people. You have to treat it like a job. I've been there. You have to go through so many attorneys. It's not even funny, Patty. I hate to tell you, but what you could do is pray and say, God, I need you to send me a really good attorney that can help me through this, and give me the wisdom that you would have to navigate the situation.
The public defender did nothing. In fact, I didn't even meet with him the day before. He just showed up at court, and really at the meeting, and it actually, a commission meeting, it actually sounded like he was defending the other side.
I'm not surprised. That's sad. My sister will have more insight to that than I will. She'll have a better, more intelligent response than what I would want to make. So I will make sure I introduce you to her. She, like I said earlier, she's fighting her own health battle. Well, but when she had, and that's the brilliant thing about her, she's still fighting, but yet she still finds time to help everyone.
That's
nice. My hero. Mm-hmm. She's my hero. She's my living hero. When they say, who's your hero? I always say my sister, because she's going through so much, but yet she still has fight and passion for everyone else. And I think that's the real meaning of love, for when God told us to love each other and love each other. I think that's what he meant by that. So hang in there, Patty. Hang in there. And if you have the doctor that you have that's for you, have him explain all of those side effects and make sure he has a thorough list of everything they put in you, because sometimes they don't give all the information to the doctors as well, the forwarding doctors. Some of your information can get left behind. You don't want that either. So, and it's sad they did all that with no diagnosis. So that's not good either.
I agree with you. I like you.
Well, I like you too. I just I don't want anybody to have to go through unnecessary pain and trauma. That's a plan of the enemy, the devil. That's what he does. He likes to have people suffer more than what they need to, or go through. People don't need to suffer. Sometimes we make, now I'm not saying in this scenario, Patty, only you can answer this, but sometimes we make decisions and then the enemy goes, aha, let me twist it this way and make this happen and that happen. I had one guy I was on a podcast with, or we were doing a bunch of book launch, and he shared his story. He had a background in law enforcement, so he likes nice cars, and he was driving across country, and the police decided to arrest him face down on the sidewalk because of what he was driving, and falsely accuse him of doing drugs. Now, this man had a background in law. He had a badge in another state. So he let this officer play it out so he can get this officer fired, which he did. I applauded him. I was like, oh, I got so excited when I heard the story. And then the officer went to another county to work. I'm like, somebody doing that never needs to be a police officer. So he made sure he got fired again. He had the connection. So that's what I mean. You have to you have to find an attorney that can argue the law, and you need to find a doctor who, and it sounds like you have, who's in your corner. Now you just have to have him go through all of the side effects with you so that you and he both can be aware of them and look out for them. And then ask him if there's anything that you can do to counteract anything that you don't like that's listed on those side effects. You know, I don't know if it's your doctor will come up with something. You know, if there's a side effect and it's like, well, is there anything I can do to build my body up against that side effect? Is there anything I can do to counteract that possible side effect? And the doctor should have that information for you.
Thank you.
It'll get it's, you know what, Kurt's right. You can, in your toughest moment, there's a victory on the other side. And if Kurt says there's a movie here, there's a movie here. And that's the victory on the other side. And I would advise you to get a private journal and start journaling about your experience while it's fresh in your brain. So you don't have to go back when someone says, hey, we want to make a movie about this. And you're like, oh yeah, but I don't remember all the details and what happened and how I was feeling. Well, journal it now and you need a clean, empty journal. And when you have that frustrating moment, or you're, and this is going to be emotional. I'm not going to make light of this, even though it sounds like it's coming out of my mouth that way. Journaling is very hard time. It can be emotional. You may cry. You may need to go for a power walk to walk off some of the frustration you may feel again, because you're literally reliving those experiences. But you want to journal them down so that when movie time comes, you can go, here you go, read this. And then when they come back to you, they're asking more clarifying things. Does that make sense, Patty?
Well, Sabrina, I'm sitting here thinking you're talking about power walks. I'm considered disabled to begin with because I have a permanent injury to my right knee. I also have a bunion growing on my right foot. So my power walks aren't that easy to do. And so, but I'm considered disabled on top of all this.
Okay. So ask your doctor that's in your corner, the one that you talked about earlier. Ask him what kind of exercise can you do to relieve stress. Okay. And you and he can be creative and come up with something together. I'm sure you guys can. So that whatever that is, you want to do that exercise to build your body up against the stresses of life. That's how I think of exercise. Exercise is the way to build me up so that when my body is going through that stressful time, it has a little edge or an advantage. Speaking of, I need to get more edge and advantage because I haven't been working out a lot, Patty. I'm just going to tell the truth. Shame the enemy. My body is like, really? Did you just tell her that? We could use some of that exercise too. So I'm glad, Patty, that you have a doctor in your corner. Now we have to get you somebody who's good at arguing the law.
Yes, definitely.
Okay. So I'm going to introduce you to Ree. I'm going to tell her I'm going to go by her house a little later today because she's dealing with a lot. That's why I was a little late today, because we had a family emergency conversation and I knew I might be a little late. So I'm going to go by, talk to her, and get her aware that you will be, the two of you will be talking together.
Thank you very much.
Sure.
I would like to bring Kurt into that discussion too. He is so very well versed at knowing the vocal part of things. He is my voice. You know, I'm glad he's on board because he's a great advocate.
Yeah, when I first met Kurt, he told me that was his passion, and here we are now on the podcast. So he's moving toward his passion, which is huge. A lot of people don't.
Yeah, he's definitely on board with all of this, and I don't mind him sharing confidential information. I don't mind giving him confidential information because he knows exactly how to use it and how to store it. So,
Mhm.
and Emily does her best. Right now, she's not talking with me real well, but
Yeah, any last thoughts before we end this?
Kurt,
Because we are at our time of ending the podcast.
I appreciate your help, Sabrina.
Sure, sure. And hang in there, like my mother would say. Hang in there, get your journal out. I'm telling you about the journal part. She would say, hang in there, it'll get better. Get your journal out, start journaling, your thoughts, your ideas, your strategies, anything that comes to mind, the story itself. And I think Ree may or may not tell you it's helpful to have it so that when you have to reaccount it for the attorney, it's already written down. You don't have to you know what I'm saying?
I'm not real good at journaling, but maybe Kurt can help me with some of that. Emily is good at writing, so maybe she can come up with some of it.
Well, yeah, a little bit, but journaling can also be a very, very personal thing too.
Exactly. And that's what we want is Emily hit the nail on the head. That's what we want is the personal aspect of it. So only you can write certain aspects of your story better than any one of us here. And that's why you want to journal.
I wonder who the Zoom user is who says, "Hola, I'm at hair salon."
That's Marianne of Waikiki. Who is sailing around Mexico right now.
Nice.
But Kurt, any last thoughts?
Wow. This was quite the show. So thanks for doing it for us, Sabrina and Patty. Thanks for sharing your story and really letting the world learn from the travesty that has become your life, or at least for whatever temporary position it has for you, Patty. Hopefully it's very temporary, but we don't know. Other people are moving it forward. So Emily, take it away. Let's button it up and let's bid farewell to our audience.
Thank everybody for thank you for Sabrina and Betty for coming on. Special thanks to Marcus Hart and Transforming Media, as well as Zach Clayton and the PAC channel and the Disability channel for allowing us to have this on their platforms. And I would encourage everybody to go to all of our social media pages and social media in general, and like, comment, post, share, so we can and help us get the word out about this podcast to as many people as possible. And Kurt, any last ending words?
I always invite everybody, if they have anything that got drummed up from the hour of the program, you can call or text me at 262-3721-SKI. That's 262-372-1754. And the email address from our radio show Wednesdays at 8:30 is abilitymkenow@gmail.com. So yeah,
And that is 8:30 Eastern.
Yeah, 7:30 Central out of Milwaukee. And so with that, keep in touch with us through social media, phone, call, or text, email. Keep in touch. Let's keep the conversation going. Back to you, Emily.
Yeah, good. Thank you, everybody. And we're here every Saturday at 3 Eastern. So we'd love for everybody to come on and join us. So please contact me in order to join us on any one of our several shows that we have. So until next time, everybody stay happy and stay healthy.